When the father of my children and unfortunately my ex-husband, Steve, and I were first married, we lived in Dallas and frequently visited our parents. Both sets lived in Oklahoma City. If we were there on a Sunday, we would sometimes attend services at the church where my in-laws belonged, a United Methodist church led by the Reverend Dr. Norman Neves. He also officiated our wedding. Neither Steve nor I were churchgoers in the day, but we wanted to show appreciation and support of his parents. And so a few years later, on a weekend visit to Oklahoma City, it just happened to be the first Sunday at a new location and a brand new building for Dr. Neves' congregation. So Steve and I accompanied his parents, who were very excited because they had contributed much time, talent, and treasure to that capital campaign and building project. When we entered the huge sanctuary, I noticed that, like the former sanctuary, and much like it is here, it was surrounded by large windows looking out onto beautiful green gardens. And as we found our seats among the rows of pews that formed a half circle around the chancel, I wondered aloud if the same architect or designer was retained for the new building. When it came time for Dr. Neves' sermon, he stepped up to the pulpit, which jutted out into that semicircled congregation. He made a joke about feeling like he was at SeaWorld feeding the fish. And then he went on to express his deep gratitude for God's abundance and the vision and generosity of those in attendance. And then he said, "If anyone asks who designed this building, I have failed." Well, in that moment, my mother-in-law leaned forward and pointedly turned to me with quite a withering look. I mean, I think she even raised one eyebrow. In the moment, I had no idea why my earlier question was problematic. But now, nearly 30 years hence, I think maybe I do. My question was about the means, not the ends. You see, Dr. Neves was a charismatic minister and a preacher, a wonderful preacher, but he was also humble and deep in faith. And that authenticity in him came through. So he developed a large following. That prior to this building project, they had 3 services on a Sunday morning, and each service was filled to the rafters. Dr. Neves and his flock had numerous active ministries that served those inside and outside the congregation. They were doing good work, and by their good work, they outgrew their building. And hence, they endeavored to create the means by which they could continue their good work. They could continue welcoming people in. They didn't plan for a relocation at a new campus because they just fancied a new building. It arose out of need to make room for seekers. And I think what Dr. Neves meant when he said, if anyone asked who designed the new building, he might have said who built it or who was involved. By someone asking that, he failed. I think what he meant was that if someone like me asked, it meant that I might be more taken with the shiny newness and the beauty of the natural surroundings, the material surroundings, and that I was drawn more to that than by this place in its potential to create abundant connection, love, faith, hope, and charity. The new campus was the means by which to create the end, which was beloved community. You may ask, why, in light of yesterday's news, am I bringing you this story this morning? A story that's 30 years old, from a different city, a different state, a different part of the country. This fellowship is much smaller and so very different theologically. What's more, we have no plans for relocation or expansion, and in fact, we're beginning to wonder how to hang on to what we have. So what's the relevance for this morning? I'm glad you asked. Dr. Neves would tell us today that a great congregation is not necessarily one with a large building, a large budget, and a large membership. A great congregation simply knows what it wants to be, from what it is inherently, what it is in its DNA, and what is expressed as its mission and vision. When it comes to means and ends, mission and vision are the ends, the ultimate, the full expression of why a congregation exists. And when a congregation knows in its bones why it exists, everything else follows, including the means by which the ends come to fruition. Now, that requires faith, folks. But I do believe Unitarian Universalists have faith. But let us imagine what happens when a congregation loses sight of its ends, its mission, and is no longer able to articulate why it exists. Well, we might compare it to a caravan that doesn't have a clear idea of where it's going. The caravan functions, it moves every day, the travelers have fun, they enjoy each other's company, they see sights, they experience things together. Some of the travelers are the richer for it. But without a map, without a plan, without an idea of what the journey is about, eventually the means of travel, the caravan, becomes an end in itself. Now, some travelers are happy to meander while working to keep the caravan going, but others will inevitably drop out to seek a journey where purpose is more expressed. A sign that a congregation's means have become its ends is an over-focus on and anxiousness about money and possessions. When a congregation loses sight of its ultimate reason for being and no longer directs its energy toward fulfilling its mission, the resulting loss of purpose is to become nearsighted. And not being able to see very far can create a sense of smallness and vulnerability and fear. And fear begets a scarcity mentality. Preoccupation with the means eclipses the end. The ultimacy, the why of the congregation is lost. Over-focus on preserving assets is the sign of an end state of the life of the congregation. It can be reversed, but the problem is losing sight of why a congregation exists. And that's particularly true in our congregationalist way of being in our polity, because each congregation in the Unitarian Universalist world operates on its own. But even Dr. Neves, as part of the United Methodist Conference, his congregation was part of the United Methodist denomination, still had a mission. And he named his church Church of the Servant, because that was his vision. And the congregation joined him in the vision of serving needs greater than their own. Serving people. So I don't want to put you at dis-ease, but maybe I want to afflict your comfort just a little, because I think the fellowship is at a critical juncture. Right now, you have enough. Enough means in the form of financial resources, building and grounds, to bridge you to a more sustainable existence. However, the critical need for this fellowship at this time is to rediscover your ends. You must come to a common understanding of the identity that lies at the foundation of this fellowship and the why of your existence today. And I think this needs to be pursued like the life of the fellowship depends upon it, because it does. And I want to say that I'm sure that some of you who are involved in mission and vision and some activities surrounding that, I'm going to get to you. Okay, so. Not only does a well-articulated mission and vision statement, the end, the purpose of this congregation, not only is that needed, but there needs to be some consensus in the fellowship about where you're going and what the journey here is all about. There have been, there are, and there always will be changes in a religious institution that not everyone is happy with or agrees with, but being a Unitarian Universalist is not about having our way all the time. The only place I know where you can get anything you want is Alice's Restaurant. I learned that from Paul. Being a Unitarian Universalist means supporting the good of the whole. The Reverend Marilyn Sewell wrote a wonderful sermon about, it was called The 7 Deadly Sins of Unitarian Universalism. And she said that individualism is one of them, over-individualism. So let me say that we are going to, at some point in our lives, we are going to hold a difference in a group, peers, friends, family, institutions. And when we have a difference, it is incumbent on us to hold that difference within the whole. And holding that difference shouldn't make you an outcast. In fact, with your difference, you represent a part of the whole. But sometimes holding a difference can be painful. It can be stressful. It could mean that you've outgrown that group or that institution. And if that happens, then it's okay to find your people, to find your fulfillment. The health and well-being of this fellowship depends entirely on finding a unifying purpose, a clear mission, and a far-sighted vision that will set hearts and spirits ablaze. I really believe that deep down, because I've seen that when hearts and spirits are ablaze in a congregation with purpose and vision, others will be drawn to your fire. And I hope that you can gain insight, faith, and confidence in the crucial idea that if you live fully into the ends, the means will follow. Friends, in our secular lives, too many relationships are transactional. Too many aspects of our lives are commodified. Everything is an exchange, even religion. Look at what we've done with the Hindu spiritual practice of yoga. We've commodified it in a studio where they'll sell you a mat if you need one. And I wonder, do you realize there are ways in which the building and grounds here could be put to use in ways that counter that commodification? Now, I want to keep this separate from ShareX operations because we're talking about outside groups here. But I'm talking about ways in which the congregation as it exists now can make use of the space that sits empty much of the week. Did you know that in the DNA of this fellowship is a model of incubating public service projects that yielded the Florence Fuller Daycare Centers? Earlier this year, a few of you accepted an invitation to participate in a project called Asset Mapping, which Rajiv talked me into changing the name of it, but I don't remember what that was, so. So asset mapping is where people in the congregation, their ideas and the spaces are brought together to create unique ways of building community, not only within, but from outside the congregation with the resources at hand. And these, look at this. This shows all the ways in which that you came up with resources, ideas, and we took these and we put them together in projects. And one of them that gained some traction or was a good idea was a music cafe once a month in Rockburger, inviting in the public. But I'm afraid that without a clear mission and our spirits ablaze with vision, we're too easily sidetracked by fear and what's going on outside our walls that we have no control over. And this is a good example of how worry over the means obscures the ends. And I don't want to leave you in a place of more worry this morning, so let me remind you of the creative work done every Saturday now, every Saturday afternoon, to lift the fellowship up out of a place of kind of stuckness and moving forward. And part of that work is to articulate a new mission statement. Claire Smith, co-president Claire Smith, had already been working on that. But now it's got some synergy. And there are other things that are happening, brainstorming and ideas and activities that are coming out of these Saturday meetings that might lead us to new ways of engaging folks already here in the congregation and those who have yet to discover what a gem of a covenanted free faith community has been waiting for them. And I promise you, in the wake of what happened yesterday, those seekers will cross our doorsill. And we need to be ready for them. We need to be ready for them with a clear vision of who we are and where we're going. That work is going to take some time, so we need to get started as soon as possible. So in your insert is a description of the Saturday meetings. The next one, July 20th, is going to be in person in Rockburger as well as on Zoom. So either way, you can participate. If you have any questions, ask Rajiv, co-president Rajiv Arora, who is also our tech person back there. Yes, thank you, Rajiv. So in the wake of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump yesterday, we need more than ever to be ready to welcome in seekers. This is a time of violence, divisiveness, hatred, and isolating consumerism. We need a beloved community which counters greed, false narratives, judgment, and the secular world. We need to be a community that is on fire with truth, meaning, justice, democracy, and more. It is yours to name. We need to be a people with souls ablaze, putting out a beacon of hope, love, and faith that will sustain us and all who we can potentially serve. Rebecca Parker, dually ordained United Methodist and Unitarian Universalist president of Star King Theological School, she said, "We are the ones we've been waiting for. Let us show up with our means and ends in the right place. I so hope it may be so."